Hi, in this video we are going to be learning the fundamentals of React by building a Tic Tac Toe application. This would teach you a lot of useful React concepts like how to structure your components, how to use the useState hook, and how to pass props down from one component to the other. This video will be focusing on the functionality of the application rather than the UI. Building a Tic Tac Toe application is a question which is often asked in front-end engineering interviews as well, so this video should be really helpful if you're trying to prepare for one of those. I recorded this video recently when I was learning React myself, and the way I've recorded this video is slightly different from the other videos you'll see on YouTube. My goal with this was to give you an insight into the thought process I have when I'm writing code. I hope you find this format interesting, and if you do, please let me know in the comments. Let's go build our Tic-Tac-Toe game now. Alright, so let's get this started. First we have to create a React project, and for that I'll be using White. The way to do that is you run npm, and I think I've run the command before, so I have it here. Npm create white latest and wheat or white, I'm not sure what it's exactly called, and then you type the name of this app, and in this case we'll call it Tic Tac Toe, and then you just tell that you want to use the React template. So you hit enter, and now your project has been created, and it's asking us to cd into the project. So we'll do exactly that and install all the dependencies. This should take a second or so. Cool. Once the dependencies have been installed, now we can run the npm run dev command to start our React app. Before we do that, I'll open the code in my code editor, which is VS Code. I increased everything a bit so that it's more readable, and we'll go here and just run npm run dev, and our application is now live. So let's go to localhost to check it out. Let me reduce these a bit, and you can see here that we have this sample app here. So the first thing I do when I create a project like this is get rid of like the boilerplate code and basically just start from scratch. So we have the index.cs file, we'll get rid of everything here. App.cs, same here as well. And we have the app.jsx file, and we'll empty this out as well. So now when we go here, we hit refresh, we should see nothing. The only code we have kept is the main.jsx file, which is importing our app from app. Right now we are not exporting anything, so that's why we don't see anything, but it's basically importing that and rendering it. This is like all boilerplate React code. Okay, so the way I like to go about thinking about creating this app is starting with like the visual component first, like what will we see on our screen, right? So at the end of the day, a to-do list app is like a tic-tac-toe app needs like a grid, right? So let's try and create that first. First we'll create a function which will just the function which we are importing here, the app function. So let's just create that so that we start seeing something. And this is the default function we are exporting from from this file, so that is why we are able to import it here and use it here. And let's just return hello world for now, and just ensure that the import is working and everything's going fine. So we go back here, we see our hello world, perfect. One thing I like to do is like set the default some CSS rules, so which are box sizing set to border box, padding set to 0, and margin set to 0. So what these do is, like, when you set box sizing to border box, which means any time on a component when we define the width and height, right? So those dimensions would so if you define like the width of an element to be 5 pixel, then that 5 pixel would include all the margin and padding that you additionally specify, because traditionally what could happen is, let's say you give like the element a width of 5 pixel and then you add a margin of 1 pixel on top of it, so the element now is like 5 and 1 pixel margin on both sides, so that is 7 pixels. With box sizing border box, like the element itself will shrink to accommodate for that margin you have added, so like the element would become 3 pixel, but the margin would be 1 and 1 on each side. So basically it allows you to specify the max width of an element, and that just makes styling things easier. Similarly, for padding and margin, we have set them to 0. So basically just removing any default padding and margin on any element. So when we go back to our app now, we see that, without all of that, it's in like the hello world is in the top right corner here. So you know what, let's just, start with a heading for this app instead of hello world. Call it Tic Tac Toe. The next thing we need after this is like a grid. Like we have to show our grid for this element. The way I'm gonna do that, okay, this is first of all, so anything you render in JSX, JSX needs like a single element, so everything needs to be wrapped around a div, or it can be wrapped around like it can be wrapped around like an empty tag as well. So let's just go for a div right now, because we'll style it and give it some padding, or let's just do that as well right now. So we'll give it the class name of container, because this is our parent container, which would be containing all our elements. And we can go here and specify the container class. Now we can give it a display of flex, because I like to use flex box to, I think it makes things easier. Then we will give it some margin on both sides, like we'll use maybe 1 rem of margin on everywhere, and let's just go with this for now. We have to import the CSS file here, so import app.css. Let's go back and see. Okay, yep, that makes sense, because we need to pass in the absolute path. So if we do this, I think that should fix it. Yep, so you see now we have like some sort of margin over here, and we can even see that when we go to inspect. And let's just not use the mobile view. Yeah, so if we inspect, you see that we have a div container, and that has a margin which is being shown in orange all around it. Cool. So back in our code now, we need to show a grid of boxes. So for that, first of all, let's just create a parent container which will have the entire thing, and then in that thing, let's focus on creating a single box right now, right? Like a single box which has maybe X marked in it. So if we do this right now, we see, okay, they are being aligned next to each other. What we want is obviously for them to be one after the other, like in a column. So we can easily fix that by going to our container div and giving it the flex direction of column. So row is the default one, but when you do column, you see that it's coming down below here. So this is gonna have like a bit of CSS. I am no expert in CSS at all, but I know enough to at least move things around and just be able to create something functional here. So now that we have this done, what we need to do is create a box around this X basically, right? So let's do that by giving it some class called square. I think let's just call it square, and we'll go back to our app.css and we'll start to define this here. So our square obviously needs to have a border, so let's give it a border of 1 rem. Color is black. We do not see this in action, and why is that? Let's see. Okay, we need to specify that it's a solid border. I think you specify the border type and not the color here. So yep, 1 rem apparently is very thick, so let's just go with 0.1. Yeah, that feels much better. And what we'll do is obviously we need to limit the width of this, so it's 100% of the parent, but the parent itself is the div, which takes 100% here. So the div is taking 100%, so it's already taking 100%. But what we can do is we can limit this to maybe 1 rem here. So if you see, we have an X here now. The only problem is that it's really small. So for that, we can go and increase the font size. So just go with 1.2 rem maybe. Okay, even that seems a little smallish. So 2 rem, maybe two would be huge. Okay, no, not that bad. Yeah. So for a box of 2 rem size, we'll obviously need to increase the width to maybe 2 as well. Yeah, that seems okay. But what I also want is I want it to be a square, so I'll fix the height as well. But when we do that, I think we'll see that okay, the X is fitting in, but just for I think it'll look pretty if we have like 3 rem, and then we want to give it maybe a padding of 0.2 rem as well. I'm just gonna see how it looks. Yeah, I think this looks much better. What we are also going to need is center this inside that div. So I think if we do a display of flex for this as well, and then we have justify content center, align items center, that should do the trick. And yep, RX is now in the center of the box. Perfect. So now what we need to do is we need to, first of all, let's just move it to the center of the screen, right? Let's just move everything to the center of the screen. And for that, similarly, like we did justify content and align items here, if we do that for our parent container, which is wrapping the H1 and the board, they should both be in center. The other thing I want to do is I want to increase the gap here. So when you're using Flexbox to style your applications, what you can do is you can specify a gap property, which basically defines the gap between each Flexbox item. So if we hit save, you'll see that the gap has increased here. Perfect. Alright, now that we have this single square with us, what we want to do is basically replicate this into a row of squares. So the first thing we can do is put 3 squares here, and of course they are in the wrong direction because we need to create a parent element which encapsulates each row. So we'll call this here and add a class name of basically maybe this is our grid and this is our row, and then we can go back to our app.css, add grid row class here with the display of flex, direction of row. I think that's the default direction anyway, so if we omit that, yep, this should be fine. So right now we are able to see 3 x's here. Nice. So what we need to do is now we basically need to have 3 rows, so we can just copy paste them one after the other, and we have our grid. Nice, right? So we are already starting to see this come together. So one thing we are observing here is that you see how if I zoom in, the center lines are darker because the borders of 2 elements are overlapping here instead of just a single which is being on the outer side. So what we can do for this is first of all, there are 2 things to be fixed here. One, we can we can target this center element here and just remove its left and right borders. Okay, so the way to do that is you can, in CSS, you can select an element which is right after an element. So if we go back here and we have a square class, right? So if we do square plus square, right, and just for just to see this, we go border equal to none. Oh, we don't want none. I guess what we want is okay, what we want is we want the border left to be equal to 0. So you see it fixed those lines. Why did it fix those lines? So basically square plus square selects the square element which is right after a square element. So you see this does not have a square class before it, whereas this has a square class before it. So it selects this square, and then for this square it removes its border which is on left side, so this border gets removed. Similarly, when we go for the last square, this is also right after a square, right? So it has a square element before it, so it gets selected as well. And for this also we remove the left one, so that's why like all our rows are now sorted. We do not have that problem on the rows. We still, however, have this problem on the middle row, and for that I think the easiest fix is probably just creating a new class name here. I'm sure there's a better way, just like we selected those elements to do this, but I think having one additional class name, in fact, we can add like two class names here, and that way we can just select our mid one, and for that what we can do is border top 0, and let's go back and see if it's working perfect. And we can do a border bottom equal to 0. So when we do that, we see all of our elements are now in perfect with perfect borders, so no borders being overlapped here, and our board state, we have basically represented our tic-tac-toe board here. Okay, what is the next thing we want? The next thing I want is that obviously the board should not have any marked X's. What I want this, like the way this would work is that we click a board space and then it gets marked, right? So let's implement that functionality first. So we'll get rid of all the X's here. And what we are going to do now is let's see how to implement this. Okay, so I'm thinking of extracting this square into another component in React. So React components are basically pieces of your UI. So right now everything is part of this app component, but we are going to extract the square into a different component. So we'll have a function called square here, and for now what it will basically render is just what we were rendering here. And let's just add the X also, just so that we can see how this is working. And then we'll replace all of these lines. So basically if you're using okay, so this can be a problem because here we have a class of square mid, right? So what we can do is we can add mid here to our top row, and what we can do is here we can say mid, basically selecting the square elements which are inside mid, and this way we can, oh actually yep, and this way yeah, perfect. This way what we can do is now our mid class would select these square elements, and basically we can just render our square up here. So yeah, what I was saying was in VS Code you can select a line, and when there are copies you can just press Command D on Mac OS, and you'll have these multiple pointers there, so you'll be able to edit all of them at once. And we'll have our square here. So let's go back, and everything should be as it was because we haven't really done anything. But one change we have made is that if we change this to O, all the elements now change to O. So that's cool, right? Now what we want is we want to have something which we are now going to introduce state into our application. So state basically means adding some sort of interactivity, some sort of re-render to our application when something happens. So for that let's just have a value here basically, which would represent what's inside a square, and then we'll have a function called set value, and we'll use the use state hook from React, and initially this would be set to blank, and what we want to show inside our square now is value. Okay, now if you go back, nothing is being shown inside those squares. What we are going to do is we are going to add a on click function here, And what this onClick function is going to do is it's going to update the value, like it's going to use the set value function to update the value. And the way state and reactivity works in React is that when you make that update, React will detect that and it will re-render the entire application. And since the value would be updated to something, we'll start seeing that instead of the blank default value we have set. So one simple way to do this is you might be thinking, like if you're new to React, your first guess would be, we'll just call the set value function and pass it. Let's just say that on click right now, we just want to, display an X. So we'll pass it X and it'll set the value as X. This would not work and our app would crash. And the reason for that is if we go to inspect and if we see our console, you'll see too many re-renders. So that is because in this code here, whenever we are rendering the div, we are actually calling the set value function every time because we have used the curly braces to call it. This is not something we want to do here. What we want is that we want to pass a function which will be called on a click. We do not want to call that function right now. So the way to fix this is we'll pass another function here, but we'll not call this function. And what this function will be doing is it will be calling the set value function. This is an arrow function, and if you do not know what arrow functions in JavaScript are, you should Google that up. But basically, they are shorthand ways of defining a function. So here, instead of calling the function actually, I am just defining a function. So these are the arguments which it requires no arguments. And as part of the function definition, what I'm just doing is I'm then calling the set value function. So every time we click, this function gets activated and then it calls the set value function instead of the set value function being called without click as well, which would happen if we do not have this curly, like if we do not define a new function here instead. So yeah, let's go back here and now when we click, you'll see that our application is marking each box with an X. That's pretty cool, right? Now the next thing we want to do is we do not want to mark every square with an X. We want to alternate between an X and an O. So you might be thinking that we can keep track of X or O inside the square, but you're forgetting that a square component basically represents one single square. So it is not aware of any global state of the entire game, right? And whether it's X's turn or it's O's turn, that is something which is like at the game level. It is at a level higher than the square. So something above the square needs to tell it what to update the value with, which means we'll have to keep a track of whose move it's next in our app function. So for that, we'll introduce another state and we'll call this, we'll have like a Boolean value here denoting, if X has the next turn or not. And let's just call this X is next. And then we'll have a set X is next. And then we'll use state here. And by default, like the first X has like the first turn in Tic Tac Toe, so we'll set it to true. So basically when the app is initialized, X has the next value. Now that we have this variable defined which will alternate between X being next and O being next, we want to change this behavior whenever a square is being clicked. And we obviously cannot do that in the square component because we do not have access to this variable. So what we are going to do is we are going to have to define a new onClick method and a new onClick function, and that function will be called, and that function will pass down to the square component, right? So let's just first define this function, okay? That'll start to make things more clear, and we'll call this on square click maybe. I'm not the best with coming up with names when recording, especially. So in this function, we want certain things to happen, right? We want to update the value which is being there on the square, and we want to update X if X is next or not. So I think updating X is pretty easy. We'll set this variable to whatever X is currently not. So When the first time it'll be true and the second time it's not true, which is false. So basically it'll be O's turn. The second part is a bit trickier because now we want to update each square's value, and value is present here in the square, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to remove this and instead pass the value as a prop to this component. So props are things which information which parent components can pass on to their child components when they render them. So now when we render each square component, we can pass in a value. So if we pass in, let's suppose x here, it will, now we'll also get rid of our on click function here, and we'll see what to do about that later, but I just want to show you how props work. So I'll just comment out this function code as well, and this state here as well. Too much to comment out. Yeah, so basically when we pass something as a prop, so we have passed x as a prop here. I don't think we need curly braces here. Yeah, so when we do this, we can go back and you'll see that an x is being rendered here. On the other hand, if you pass in anything as a value here, basically O, let's suppose, so you'll see an O is being rendered here. So props are basically, props allow you to manipulate like what is being rendered in the child component by passing down that value from the parent component. So if we are planning to do that for the entire board, one thing you have to realize is that each board would have a different, like you'll pass in a different value, right? Like it's not the same value for every board, like every square inside the board. So what we are going to do is we are going to need a global array which would store all these values, right? And we can like store them in a single dimensional array, even though you could have created a multi-dimensional, like a 2D array of like an array of arrays which have like length 3. So one array would be this, one would be this, one would be this. We'll see if we need that. Right now I do not think that's needed. So what we can do is we can basically create one array of like a length 9, and that would represent each of these squares starting from 0 index till the 8th index here. So I hope it's clear why we are creating an array instead of like passing individual values, because we want to store the state at a global level, like our entire game, like consider the app function as our game function, right? Like our entire game needs to be aware of what is the state for each particular square. Even if it's not crystal clear right now, like when we code it out, I think it'll start to make a lot more sense. So let's create a function called arr to denote array, and then another function to set this array. And when we like the default value for this is going to be an empty array. So we'll have an array and we'll pass it length, which is 9, and then we'll fill this array up with null, basically an empty array, like an empty array of 9 elements. Now what we want to take place is that when you click a square, we want to update that particular entry in the array and basically set our array. So when we do that, the entire thing would re-render. But the way to do that would be like simply, like let's assume we are getting the index of the square we want to manipulate as an argument for this function, and let's set this index to something. We'll set it to, okay, so we'll have to evaluate if x is next or not, right? So for that I'll use the ternary operator, which basically means check if x is next. If x is next, then we want to set our array at the index to x, but if x is not next, then we want to set our array at the index to be equal to O. Okay, so this I hope it's clear so far, but what we also need to take care of is that we cannot just do, by the way, like this is another React caveat, we cannot just do set array to array, because React does not see this as a new array. React sees it as you setting the array to itself, and it does not count it as a change, so it does not re-render our UI, which is something we want. To enforce that, what we can do is we can create a new array from our original array. So the way to do that is, like, the easiest way is to just use like a slice function, which basically slices an array, but if you give it no arguments, it'll just create a copy of that array in new array. And then for this new array, we'll change the element at the index, and then we'll set our current array to the new array. So this way React knows that it has there has been some change, and then it will re-render our entire UI. Okay, so this takes care of our on-click function. I don't think right now we need to do anything here. But one thing we need to do is that we need to pass in the correct value for each of these squares. So basically that would correspond to their index. So this would be array index 0 and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to copy this and put it everywhere. So basically now all of our squares know which value of the array they have to render. The other thing we now want to fix is that we want to pass in this on square click function, right? So we want to have like a on click function for each of this. So we'll have like on click, and when a square is being clicked, what we want to do is we want to call our on square click function, which we just defined, but like we learned, we cannot call this function because it needs an argument. So we'll pass in an arrow function, and then what we'll do is we'll call this on square function, and we'll pass it the number of the index which we want to update in the array, which stores our state of the game. So for the first elements is 0, and then we'll do so on and so forth for all the other elements. Cool. Awesome. So I think first of all we need to okay, so I think our app should now work. Let's go back to our browser and let's see what's happening here. So when we click this, okay, nothing is happening right now. Okay, that is interesting. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense because we are passing this on click function here, but we are not adding it to our div. So we'll import this as a prop, and then our div is the one which actually needs this on click function, right? So we'll pass it here. Perfect. Now I'm thinking what we can do. No, I think this is the way to do it. Yeah. Let's go back here and let's click a box. Yep, perfect. So we have an X which is being rendered. OXO, perfect. So it is alternating between X's and O's. And our game is now like almost working. One thing I'm noticing is that when I hover over an element, I see this. Okay, the state is being changed. Yeah, that makes sense because when you click the same element, we are allowing it to toggle, right? So one thing we need to do in our on click function is check if the index is like if it's already filled, we do not want to do anything. So if array at that index already exists, so it's basically not equal to null. So one thing you can just, if you want to be explicit, is you can just do if is not equal to null, but we can just go ahead with this also because a null value would translate to false and it would not get executed, but we just return. So if something exists there, just simply return out of it. So refresh, and now when we multiple times when I click this X, nothing happens. So X O X O X, that's correct, right? Yeah, X O X, perfect. But yeah, what I was talking about earlier was that I see that you have this text selection cursor, and I do not want this. I want it to be a pointer. So for that, what we can do is for our square, we can go here and we can say cursor equal to pointer, hit refresh, and now we have basically this pointer which lets the user know that that this is clickable. Great. So the next thing we want is basically to check for a winner. So right now if you see that If X wins, our game still continues instead of just showing a message that X is won. So for that, we need a function which checks if there is a winner or not. So let's go ahead and define that function, and we can just define it here. Function check winner, and obviously this function will take the game board. Actually, instead of calling this array, we should have called it board, would have been a better name. But let's just go ahead with board here, and this is going to take board as an argument, and then we want to just check for a win condition here. Now this is really interesting how you check for like a win condition in tic-tac-toe. Like obviously you know how like in any time like the same element exists on the same row, same column, or diagonally, but how do you translate that into code is pretty interesting. So the way you do that is you define a set of combinations which lead to a win. So basically if the same element exists at index 0, 1 and 2, like let's suppose this is like 0 to 8 indexed, so if the same element exists as 0, 1, 2, then it's a win. Obviously if it exists as 3, 4, 5, it's a win. Similarly at 6, 7, 8. But then also like if it exists as 0 and this is like 3 and this is 6, so 0, 3, 6 is a win. Then similarly 1, 4, 7 is a win, and 2, 5 and 8 is also a win. So you have these sets of numbers which, if the same element exists at those numbers, it's a win. So we first define these sets of numbers which are our winning condition. So let's have like win conditions, I don't know, and this is an array of multiple arrays, and so here we define all the possible combinations which lead to a victory. So obviously the first is like if the same element is present in the first row, then if the same element is present in the second row, similarly for the third row, and now basically if it's present in the first column, then the winning numbers would be 0, 3, 6. If it's present in the second column, so I'm basically using this basically represents like like I'm using this as a guide for the numbers. So 1, 4, 7 would be the second column which would lead to a victory. Then 2, 5, 8 would be the third one which would lead to the victory. And one thing which also leads to a victory is a diagonal column. So basically 0, 4 and 8 and 2, 4 and 6. So if the same element is present diagonally also, then it leads to a victory. So 2, 4, 8, sorry, 0, 4, 8 and then 2, 4 and 6. Perfect. So these are all the combinations which would lead to a victory in our game of tic-tac-toe. What we need to do now is iterate through all of these and see if the same element, that is either an X or O, is present in all of these locations. And if it is present, then that user or that element, basically X or O, wins. So let's have a for loop here to iterate, and for win of win conditions, and this basically loads each row, basically iterates through each row, and that row is present in win here. What we are going to do is we are going to extract like the 3 numbers from that row. So do this. I'm not sure. Okay, maybe if I have let here, then that works. Yeah. So we have those numbers. Now we want to check if they are the same or not. So first thing we need to check is if something exists in the first part as well, because if it's empty, then it makes no sense to check it, right? So if something exists, and then we need all of these conditions to be true, not just one of them. So we are using the logical AND operator instead of the logical OR operator. So we check if A exists, and then we check if the state of the board at A is equal to the state of the board at B. So double equal to basically checks the value, or triple equal to checks the value and the type. Double would suffice here, but triple is just like better since we like want it to be a string as well. So we have checked that, like, let's suppose we are talking about the diagonal, we are talking about the diagonal victory. So basically xxx. So this thing first checks that is an x even present in this spot, because if it's not, then it doesn't make sense to evaluate the other things. Then it checks if board of A is equal to board of B. So basically these two elements are same or not. And this is how it's the way it's happening is like when it's checking for this, it's loaded 0, 4 and 8 into its into A, B and C. So it's checking A at 0, A at what was this? Sorry, I forgot. A at 4, and it's checking the board at 0, the board at 4 and the board at 8. So if you remember, our board is in like it's an array where each index corresponds to each of these values. So it's checking if this is equal to this, and then if we check if this is equal to this, because if this is equal to this and if this is equal to this, okay, too many this is, but yeah, you get the idea, right? Like follow my pointer. So if this element is equal to this element and this element is also equal to this element, then it is obvious that these two elements are the same. And basically all three of them are same and we have a win condition. So we go back here and we type board of A is equal to board at C. So if all of this is true, then we have a winner, right? And let's just have winner which is set to maybe yeah, winner which is set to null by default, and then we set the winner equal to whatever is there at the at any of the spot basically. So we set this and then from this function we just want to return who the winner is. Yep, perfect. So we set we assume there is no winner. We go through all of these conditions, and then if there is a winner we just return that. If there is not a winner, then we'll be returning null. So now when do we want this check for a winner to happen, right? We want this to happen anytime you click a box, because anytime you click a box, it might just be that a win condition has been triggered. So the first thing we want to do is when we have a square click, we want to check if there is a winner or not as soon as that square has been clicked, right? Like so we check for a winner, and if this returns a non-null value, then obviously we want to exit out of this function because that means we have a winner. The next thing we want is basically we do not want to check for a winner like when a square is being clicked, right? Because when a square is being basically after a square has been clicked, we want to go through the board state, right? So this is something which does not happen on square click. Basically we do not need our like the check to be here, and we want the check to happen like after the square has been clicked. So what happens right now is like the square gets clicked, we go through all of this code, and then we call these use state hooks, and what these do is they cause the UI to re-render. So when that UI is re-rendering, we want to check if there is a winner or not. The only reason I've added a check winner stage here is basically that you click a square, and as soon as you click a square there's a win condition, so you exit out of this function, and then we want the code which will be here before this return statement to be executed. And what is that code basically? So that code is we define the winner here, and we add like check winner, and we pass it the board state. And now if this check winner is null, we do not want to render anything. But if we have a winner, let's have like another div which will show game information. So let's type it later, but what we'll do is basically we'll do like winner. Basically if there is a winner, yeah, we just right now we can just add winner. So if it's null, there's no winner, we won't see anything. But if there is an actual winner, we'll see who the winner is, right? So I think this should work, but let's just test it out. Now we see an additional gap because we are rendering that div, but we'll fix that and see how to optionally render it. But first we just want to check for the functionality. So I'm not able to mark anything here. That is interesting. Do I have some errors? Yeah, cannot read properties of undefined reading 0. Let's see. So at check winner on square click, it's reading undefined, which is 0. Why is that? Give me a second, let's figure this out. Okay, so the two places we are calling this check winner function is one here, and the other is here. Okay, yeah, I see it. Like we are not passing in the board here, so it's trying, when we do this function call, it was trying to read something which was undefined. This should fix it. Let's go back and try it out. X. Oh, okay, yeah. So we're able to click the board, so we know the code, the issue has been fixed. But we want to still check if the code we wrote for finding the winner is working or not. And we see an X here. So basically, whenever there is a winner, we see it here. And after that, these boxes have become unclickable, because anytime we go here, anytime we do a square click, this if statement basically returns, because it checks for a winner, it finds a winner, and none of this code gets executed. Perfect. So I think we have a functional version of our game running. Let's just double check if O is able to win as well, which it should be, but just it's nice to test out the code more. Yep, we see O is winning. One thing I can think of is that we are not handling the case of a draw. So let's just see what right, like, okay, in this case, oh my god, I didn't know getting a draw would be this tough. Then let's have another X here. Okay, that was a no. I keep forgetting whose turn it is, which is a very good reason to add a like whose turn is it next here. But let's do that later. So right now it's O's turn. O can go here, X can go here, O can go here, X can go here, and in this case it's a draw, but it's showing us nothing. So we need to add something which says like shows a message in case there is a draw. So how do you check for a draw? So the way to check that is I can think of a solution where we just go through all the spaces in the board, and if any one space is empty, then that means there is like still scope for the game to continue. So in that case, we have like a flag or something which tells us, and then we return. So let's just write the code to check if all the spaces are full or not, right? So we can do that here for square misspelled of board, and we have to initialize this variable for square of board, and then what we basically do is if square exists, so anytime is a square is empty, can we return no, right? Because there might be empty spots, but the game still could have been won. So what I'm thinking is maybe we need to do this after this, right? Like, so we check for a winner. If we have a winner, all well and good, but if we don't have a winner, then we want to check if all the spots are full or not. So if yeah, I think that is the code for this. So if winner is not equal to null, or we can just do not winner. So basically we do not have a winner. If this process did not give us a winner, then we iterate through all the squares. If we find an empty square, okay, so if square is equal to null, or the simplest way is that if we find an empty square, then that means the game still continues, right? So in that case, let's just what we should do here, for simplicity, let's just have this square check to null. So basically, if we find an empty square, that means the game continues on. So we just return the winner. We just basically return null in this case, not even the winner, because we are sure that like there is no winner. But if we come out of this loop, so basically, just for readability purposes, I'm changing all this. So if we have no winner, so basically nobody won the game, then go through all the squares of the board. If there is an empty square, that means there are still moves which can be made, and in that case return null. But in case this does not get returned, then we simply return it's draw. So I think this should work now. Let's just try it out once. Yeah, we can already see that it's detected that it's a draw, but we'll have an X here, and then O can go here, X goes here, O goes here, X tries to cut it here. Oh no, there are two winning moves. So O goes here, X tries to cut it here, O goes here, X goes here, and it's a draw. So yeah, it's working perfectly. Just to re-summarize in case it got confusing here, what we are basically doing is we have these win conditions. So we go through these win conditions, and the first thing we check is if we have a winner or not. If we have a winner, we store it in this and we never enter this loop. And okay, yeah, what we should be doing is we should be returning the winner here. So right now the code is kind of broken, right? So if we have found a winner, we should just return the winner right here. If winner, return the winner. So yeah, if you go through the board conditions, if you find a winner, then just return the winner. And we can just have this inside here only, so we don't loop through all the conditions. Yeah, so we loop through all the conditions basically, and whenever we find a winner, we just return that, right? Like we don't even need to do this, we just do a return board of A. So if we find this is our win condition, if this gets triggered, we just return the winner. So if we reach a point where we haven't found a winner so far, again, so I'm simplifying the code basically, so we do not need this winner variable as well. So if this statement did not return here, we can just simply then iterate and check to see if all the squares are occupied or not. So if we go through it and if we find that a square is null, that is there is empty space there, that means the game continues on, so you just return null. But if you go through this and you do not return a null, that means all the squares have been occupied, then that means it's a draw. So this is the final code. Here we see the draw condition is working. Our win condition should also be working, regardless of who wins. Yep. So yeah, that is the code, and let's just check our draw condition once again. Who goes here? This is harder than coding the application. Then it is X's turn, right? X goes here, O goes here, X goes here, and it's a draw. So everything is working right now. Okay, so even though I said that this is not going to be like, we're not going to make a pretty tic-tac-toe game, we are just focusing on the functionality in this one. But I still think like one improvement I can think of right now is showing whose turn it is, and that would just fix this dynamic, like right now nothing is shown and then suddenly we have X pop up, so it would fix those things. So let's show whose turn it is next, and we can do that easily by so where is the space where we are displaying our game info? This is our game info div. I'm not styling it, but let's just for the sake of marking it, give it the name game info. And what we are going to check here is that if there is a winner, then we are going to show that winner. Now I can do this with ternary operators. I'm tempted to do that, and that would make it tricky to understand, so let's just do it with like a regular if statement. So in fact, let's just do it here. So if we have a winner, okay, Then let's just have a game info variable. Game info. So if we have a winner, then our game info will be equal to that winner. This is pretty clear. Nothing. If we do not have a winner, then our game info will show whose turn it is next. And the way we do that is we check if X is next. Here I want to use a ternary operator, so then we can be X's turn to play. If that's not the case, then it is O's turn to play. Cool. And then finally here we render this information out. So let's check it out. So it's X's turn to play, then it's O's turn to play. X's, O's, X's, O's, X. Okay, we should show like X is 1 instead of just having an X there. So winner plus space has 1. Let's go back and we can already see an updated message, but yep. So now we have added like this functionality where the user who's playing our game, they know whose turn it is to play next. Congratulations, we finally built our Tic Tac Toe game. I hope you had as much fun building along with me as I did when I was learning how to do this. If you want to expand on this application, I have some ideas for you. The very first thing you can do is improve the UI to make it look a bit more presentable. The next thing I would suggest adding is maybe an undo functionality which, lets the user undo the previous move and make a better decision. One more idea is to implement how many games X has won as opposed to O. If you really want to take things to the next level, you can also add an AI opponent which the user can play against instead of, the user operating both X's and O's. I'll link some of the resources related to how you can do this in the description for this video. I hope you enjoyed watching this video and learned something new. If you did, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe the channel and maybe share the video on your socials. I'm someone who loves learning new things and I'm building this YouTube channel to share the things I learn with everyone. If that sounds interesting to you, I hope you'll stick for the journey and I'll see you in the next videos.